Oftentimes, if your marriage or relationship is breaking down, your first instinct is going to be to push harder, to say more, to do more, to fix it now. There's often a big sense of urgency. However, that's often not the most effective thing to do. Pulling back, when done in the right way, flips the dynamic entirely. So in this video, I'm going to talk about detachment, how it works within relationships, and why it's the one thing that can save your marriage. So one thing that's come up over and over again in working with the thousands of members that I've worked with is this idea of detachment. A lot of people conceptually understand that detachment is important for relationships, but they get worried about doing it because they think that it means that they don't care. And if they don't care about the relationship, then they're going to lose this relationship. The problem is that people are mistaking detachment for apathy, but they're almost exact opposites. And this confusion is a massive reason why attempts to reconnect and reconcile a relationship often fail. Apathy is emotional withdrawal. You stop caring, you stop showing interest, and you stop engaging in ways that show someone that they matter. Detachment, on the other hand, is very different. Detachment is a deliberate separation from ego-driven reactions, and we'll talk about what this means in a second. Detachment is pulling away from the need to control, the need to be right, the need to shield yourself from feeling vulnerable, feeling exposed, but it's while staying fully present and emotionally available. Detachment removes your ego, not your care. So the trap is when it comes to relationship that when people think that they're detaching, they just go cold, right? This stoic idea of being emotionally withdrawn, cold, and not caring and not engaging. They cut off communication, they avoid conversations, they act unreachable, hoping that distance is going to spark some sort of curiosity or repair the relationship randomly. But instead of curiosity, this pulling away actually creates resentment. The signal received from your partner or your ex-partner isn't confidence, it's rejection. And this rejection drains connection really fast. And I see a lot of it in my comments of this idea of giving space in this way, and it has backfired. It's pushed their partner further and further away because trust isn't rebuilt and the emotional discord between you both ends up deepening. So there's a massive reason why this distinction matters so much, because detachment isn't about pulling away from your partner. It's about loosening your grip on your own self-image. It's actually very self-focused. So you're not withdrawing from your partner, you're dismantling this protective shell of your ego. So a really quick way of seeing it is to imagine being at a party and your favorite song comes up, but you hold off from dancing. Not because you don't want to, but because you're afraid to look silly. That's ego holding you back. And once you detach from that fear of judgment, detachment is detaching away from this fear of judgment. So when you detach from this fear of judgment, you end up dancing. You end up feeling more free to move. And in relationships, it works in the same way. Dropping this ego means choosing connection over your pride. And this is one of the most crucial concepts when it comes to reconciliation, when it comes to repairing a relationship, is this detachment from your ego. When I speak with potential new members and they talk about, sometimes they sit on the fence and they say, I don't know whether I should pursue it or not. And I ask them, why not? Why would you not pursue it? And the only real reason, after a little bit of digging, is ultimately just pride. They don't want to feel rejected. They don't want to feel embarrassed that they pursued a relationship and their partner has said no, or said no multiple times. But this is just pride. And I see it often in my comments as well, is that when people are saying, why would you want to go back? Why would you want to reconcile with someone when they've already said no? But when you think about it, the only reason why you wouldn't pursue it is because of rejection, is because your pride would be hurt. And again, I understand why people would do that, but it's not very helpful for getting stuff done, for pursuing your goals. If you think about going for a job, yes, you may get rejected and yes, it may hurt, but it only hurts because you're so attached to this outcome. When you're not attached to this outcome, you're not attached to your ego, then it becomes a lot easier to pursue things that you want to do because you're not worried about getting hurt. You're not affected by the pride aspect of it. You're not embarrassed to go for the things that you want to go, and it becomes a lot more freeing. And you can ask yourself this right now. If you think about it, when was the last time you pulled back? Was it to protect your pride, or was it actually to protect the relationship? Pulling back oftentimes is more about ourselves than it is about the relationship. And the answer to that question ends up telling you whether you are practicing detachment or drifting into apathy. When your ego runs the show, your focus shifts away from resolution and to self-defense. Every disagreement becomes a contest to win, and you're not thinking about the relationship anymore. You're thinking about yourself and your ego rather than the relationship as a whole. Because every potential moment of vulnerability, of honesty, becomes a risk to avoid. So you end up looking at the risk of the damage to your ego, to your pride, and you avoid it. So you don't pursue the person that you're wanting to reconcile with. You don't ask the questions as to why your partner does not want to be with you. You don't look at all the things that could actually be very beneficial to you, all the ways that you could improve, because you're too worried about your ego and your pride. And it's the same when it comes to like jobs and careers, is that feedback is actually really useful, but oftentimes we put our pride first and we avoid any type of feedback. We don't ask for feedback, or when we do experience feedback, we think, oh my God, this is terrible. This is awful. I hate hearing this. The result ends up being this constant friction because your energy centers on protecting the image of yourself inside the relationship rather than actually strengthening the bond itself. True detachment stops this pattern in its tracks. It allows you to listen without rehearsing some sort of witty comeback or defensive retort. And it means that you can express affection without calculating whether you're losing ground. It stops it becoming this battle between you and your partner, and it actually joins you together against the overall problems, the overall challenges in the relationship. When you detach, you can actually focus on the challenges within the relationship rather than seeing it as you versus your partner, because this defensive edge disappears from your actions and your partner starts to feel that change instantly because your intent behind your behavior is no longer guarding yourself against loss of pride, but to actually engage with clarity. So it's really important to understand the difference between apathy and detachment, because this changes everything. It's not about doing less, it's about reacting less from fear and more from awareness. And it's this shift in energy that sets the stage for what's coming next. So I want to talk a little bit more about how attachment creates desperation and kills attraction. So attachment in overdrive turns into desperation, and that desperation really kills attraction fast. So you can say all of the right things, but when your energy, your micro expressions underneath is loaded with neediness and tension and control, your partner feels it before you've even finished your sentence. And this is why sometimes I see in my comments about people who are saying, oh, I'm trying to repair my relationship and I took accountability. I said XYZ, I said ABC, and my partner still doesn't want to come back to me. This is because when you're overly attached to the outcome, to your pride, that it comes across in everything that you say. So you can say all of the right things. You can say, I take accountability, I screwed up, XYZ, ABC, but your energy is very desperate, it's very needy, and your partner feels this pressure. So even though they may be like, look, I forgive you, but I'm still not attracted to you, because attraction isn't just about what you do, it's about the emotional state that you're carrying when you approach. And this is really important when it comes to reconciliation. There are a lot of things that you can do right, but if your internal state is not in a very good place and you're overly attached, what it often means is that your partner can logically forgive you and say, look, I get it, I understand, and it's okay, like we can move on from it. But if you're not detached, then your partner is going to feel the emotional weight of this emotional dysregulation within yourself. Think of it as an internal tug of war. So the harder you fight those internal fears, the louder they show up in your behavior. And this is where a lot of people who are trying to repair a relationship end up in a really anxious state, and they try to use this anxiety or desperation as fuel to get movement. And this can work short term. Your partner can feel this drive and movement within you, but long term, it destroys the connection. So these high reactivity states trigger defensive patterns in both you and your partner. Your tone tightens, your patience drops, your focus shifts to scanning for proof that they're pulling away, and their nervous system reads that intensity as a threat and responds with withdrawal. It becomes a feedback loop. To put all this into a summary is that the more attached you are, the more it triggers a defensive mechanism in your partner, and the less safe they feel. This ends up destroying more emotional safety, which is the currency that you're trying to rebuild right now. So this attachment, this need for constant validation or reassurance that everything's going to be okay, and this need for your ego, your pride to be fulfilled, ends up pushing your partner further and further away. So again, this is not about caring less. It's about ending the internal fight with yourself so that you stop the internal tug of war within yourself. This stops the external tug of war with your partner. These outside behaviors, these actions, this constant chasing ends up slowing down and gets to a nice middle ground. What ends up happening is that this lighter energy within yourself, this sort of inner peace, whatever sort of term you want to use for it, it draws people in. It reattracts your partner back without you needing these extra texts or to overanalyze where they're coming from or what they're doing or these X-back strategies. So the answer isn't to try harder. The answer is to reduce the resistance inside you so that attraction can end up returning. And that's where skill comes in. This is what a lot of my members have found, is that when it comes to relationships, the emotional side of things is about building a skill. Detachment itself is a skill, and this is a skill that can be learned. All relationships are skill-based. This is what so many people don't understand, and there's so much advice out there that tries to overcomplicate it and give these philosophical or spiritual kind of essences to it, but it's not. It's just skill-based. Once you realize that, it becomes a lot more actionable because you can focus on what you do every day in order to increase that skill. Relationships don't have to be that complicated. Skills don't have to be that complicated. It's an effort stat, and detachment is another effort stat. Now, obviously, I can't just go into it fully in a YouTube video, but if you do want to learn more and you want to potentially maybe work together, then join my Relationship Bootcamp, where you'll start to learn the same fundamentals that all of my members start with to start turning their relationships around. I'll drop a link in the description if you want to get started. Detachment done right isn't about being uninterested. It's about learning to not shut down. So how do you cultivate detachment without shutting down? The first step is always awareness. Awareness always comes before action. So you can't respond with clarity until you actually feel and realize what is happening inside yourself. This is self-awareness. A lot of people think that they have self-awareness, but oftentimes we're quite blind to it. Without building that awareness, you're running on autopilot, and that autopilot is where neediness and control starts to leak into every interaction. And this is obviously very bad for trying to reconcile with a partner. So most people skip this awareness and jump straight into tactics or texts. And this is why these X-back tactics and scripts don't work. It's because you're emulating emotional regulation. You're emulating you're detached, but you're not actually detached. So it may work for a minute, but long-term, it's going to become very obvious that you're faking it until you're making it. And your partner doesn't want fake. Your partner wants real, right? You don't want to fake that you can play basketball, because when eventually you'll get tested on the court, everything's going to fall apart and everyone is going to see through the facade. So you have to actually put in the time and effort to build the skills. And that starts with self-awareness, being able to know I am needy. I am overly attached. So this first step is building this awareness. Look for signs that you are acting attached. Usually when you're building this awareness, it's easier to look at your actions and work your way backwards as to what feelings and thoughts led to those actions. For example, if you are purposefully trying to force some space, this can be a sign that you are overly attached. If you're constantly asking for reassurance that the relationship is going to work out, this can also be a sign that you are overly attached. If you are going around telling everyone that you don't care about your partner, that can also be a sign that you are overly attached, because you're trying to show everyone about how over your partner you are, when it actually works on the inverse. Everyone can see that because you're talking about your ex-partner so much, you're actually very upset about it. This is part of this self-awareness building and looking at the way that you are acting, and then start to reverse engineer what is the feeling behind this. And then when you start to look at the feeling behind the action, then you can start asking yourself, is it an ego thing? Is it my pride? Do I feel like I'm a failure because my partnership broke up? Do I feel worried that my partner is going to tell me a lot of tough truths that I don't like to hear? Am I worried about my partner judging me because I'm still pursuing and trying to repair the relationship? Start to look at the ego underneath and whether that's what you're afraid of. So again, this is a deeper process, but these are things you can start today to start deconstruct whether you are just trying to protect your ego, ultimately. It's only then, once you build that self-awareness, that you can then start looking at more effective actions in order to repair the relationship, rather than sitting in this sort of desperation state or this pulling away state. It stops you from flitting back and forth. Once you start to remove your ego from the situation, then you can start having much more effective conversations that actually repair the relationship. A lot of people try to avoid arguments, but oftentimes they avoid arguments because they're worried about their pride. They're worried about feeling hurt. They're worried about the truths that they may find, or they're worried that they may respond in a way that is defensive. Once you start to remove the ego, then it becomes a lot easier to have deeper conversations that actually repair the relationship, and you stop being defensive. I've actually done a deep dive video on how crucial not avoiding arguments is. Like, you have to have difficult conversations, but it's about how you do it. So I'll leave you with that deeper dive video on conflict, and I will see you over there.